Hello, welcome to this Shield Global Online Safety Conference, the second year. Apologize for the slight delay. I started the conference and didn't actually start the conference. I'm honored to have Lola Fisher, the Gen Z New Zealand, opening the conference this year. It really fits perfectly for what we're trying to do, get different voices in a globally relevant topic. Thank you for starting out, Lola, and we're really looking forward to your talk.
Thank you so much, Angeline. I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Lola, and I'm joining you all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand, where it is 1 p.m. I've just had my lunch, so I'm feeling, really excited to get into it today. Um, I will share my screen, and we'll jump straight into the presentation. The title of this presentation today is called Nothing About Us Without Us, Rethinking Youth Engagement in Digital Safety Work. And I'll talk a little bit more about this theme, this kind of phrase soon. But I wanted to introduce myself a little bit more and tell you who I am. So yeah, I'm Lola Fisher. I'm 17 years old and I'm the co-founder of Gen Z Aotearoa, or Gen Z New Zealand, which is an organization that supports young people who are doing incredible change-making work around the country to support them in their journey. But before that, when I was 13 years old, I started a digital media company called Create Happy Media. And we worked with over 120 young people over 4 years. And we're still running at the moment. And so I got a really unique insight into what it was like for young people working online in the digital world, both using social media and just online platforms as well. And that gave me a really good foundation to talk about what we're going to talk about today. So I have over 5 years of experience now working with young people in youth engagement, and that has given me a great foundation in understanding what it's like for young people to be engaging and co-designing with organizations and companies when it comes to a range of different topics, not only online safety. But in the last year or so here in New Zealand, we've had a lot of discourse around the social media ban, and as you've seen, our kind of counterparts of the country, Australia, has moved to ban social media for under 16-year-olds, and so that sparked a lot of conversations here in New Zealand around will we do the same, and our government is currently making moves to do so, and so that's kind of given me a really kind of jumping point to begin entering into the conversations around online safety, and it's kind of a hot topic here in New Zealand at the moment as well. So there's lots of conversations. I've worked with more than 50 organizations globally, including with groups like Save the Children and Amnesty International. So I'm currently working with Save the Children New Zealand on a digital safety roundtable think tank here in New Zealand, working with tech companies, parents, teachers, government, and young people, all the stakeholders in the online safety conversation, to try and figure out what are the solutions when it comes to keeping our young people safe online. I do want to preface this conversation by saying that sometimes I will accidentally slip into Te Reo Māori, which is our indigenous language here in New Zealand. And so if you don't understand something that I've said, please feel free to just pop it in the chat and I can give a translation, but it comes out of habit, so it's hard for me to kick sometimes. Um, yeah. So online safety for young people means very little if young people are not part of building it. And that sentence sounds quite simple, but it very much challenges the way most of our systems in the modern age operate. Across government, tech companies, schools, NGOs, and research institutions, a lot of energy goes into protecting young people online. We have policies that have been drafted, frameworks that are designed, bans put in place, and steps taken to try to protect young people. Funding is distributed, interventions are rolled out. But still, there are one group of people who are often missing from the center of those conversations, and that is young people themselves. And so this afternoon, I want to talk about what it means to take youth expertise seriously in conversations around digital safety, not in a symbolic sense, but rather in a sense where young people are the ones shaping the work, influencing the outcomes, and being recognized for the knowledge they already hold about their digital lives. So there's this concept that we talk about a lot in New Zealand in the youth engagement space, which is lived experience should be seen as expertise. Um, we are all experts in our own lives, right? And when it comes to talking with young people and understanding their experiences, what we have to fundamentally understand is that only young people know what it's like to be a young person today. And I think this is often missed in conversations or consultations with young people, is that we are often trying to bring this preformed idea of what it means to be a young person. Um, and understandably so, right? Like all of us have been young once, we've all been 16, 17. The only difference is that you might not have been 16 or 17 for 10 or 20 years, and a lot has changed in 10 or 20 years. And so if young people are the digital experts, the experts in their own lives, why are they left out of the conversation in digital safety? Because if young people are missing out on being part of these conversations, and if these conversations are happening without young people in the room, you'll always, always miss something essential, and that is the experience and expertise of young people. So yeah, what this kind of looks like in practice, well, there's a couple of key tips I wanted to touch on here. I've done a lot of work with some really great organizations who have worked really hard to do meaningful and good youth engagement. And one example would be most recently Gen Z Aotearoa, Gen Z New Zealand worked on a project called ChatSafe. And ChatSafe is a set of guidelines for young people who are talking about suicide and self-harm online. So when young people are having these conversations in the digital space, how are they having those conversations safely and well? And so these guidelines were created by an organization called Origin in Australia, which is a research institute. And they created these chat-safe guidelines that have then been taken all across the world and adapted for different countries and different kind of groups and demographics of young people. And we were lucky enough to be the first to adapt it here in New Zealand. So we were working with one of the major universities, major colleges in New Zealand to take the experiences of young people and turn them into a campaign, the Chat Safe campaign. So the organization, the university, came to us and they said, hey, we have this project that we're working on. Here's what we've already done. We've already engaged with young people across the country. We've worked really hard to ensure that their experiences are centered when we're working with them and organizing with them. And now we have these kind of key messages from young people that we want you to turn into videos. And we said, you know what, that sounds awesome. We're really keen to be involved. And working with the university really changed my perspective on what it means to co-create something with young people. Because what they did really well is they had a researcher and a professor working with us because it was also a research project. So they had two adults who were working with our team, and we brought together a team of I think it was 13 under 20-year-olds to our major city here in Auckland, New Zealand, and to script, plan, and deliver and shoot a campaign in 3 days. So they gave us the resources, the money, their time, the space, and all we had to do was turn up and use our knowledge and experiences to support them in delivering the campaign. And that weekend was crazy and chaotic. We had never created a campaign like this before. It was the first time we'd done something of this scale. But what was done really well from their side was that they were just there to support. They were there for pastoral care if we needed anything. They were there to make sure that anyone who needed to be fed or helped out was done so, and they dealt with the admin side of things. And they also, luckily for us, they did the dishes for us, which was really nice. That was a highlight for sure. And they just made sure that it was a really easy experience for us to make and deliver a campaign of scale. So that's a great example of how you can treat lived experiences expertise, because not only is that sentence true, but in practice it also looks like just because young people are experts in their own lives doesn't mean that they necessarily know how to use or act on that experience. So supporting them in all the ways that you can to make sure that they are celebrated and uplifted and don't feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders is really important when it comes to working with young people. One of the first misunderstandings that we have to address is the way that adults often talk about the internet, because we often hear phrases such as the online world or when young people go online. But this creates the idea that the internet is a separate place, which is somewhere where young people visit or step away from or return to later. But that is simply not how it works. For many young people, the internet is very much woven into our daily lives. It's definitely in the rhythm, right? We pick up our phones in the morning and we check our social media, and then we spend our day. Our day is often revolved around our devices, our screens, the online world. It's where friendships grow, identities are explored, culture moves. There's a big activism movement online, where young people can get their TV shows and humor, where music is discovered, where ideas are tested. It's really the foundation of one of the foundations of our society as we know it in this current age. And it's not, or no longer is, an alternate reality. It's actually just part of our reality every day. And that really matters when we talk about safety, because when adults design digital safety policies, they often don't design it from the outside, right? We observe behaviors and collect data and analyze trends. And those perspectives are so valuable, but they often remain observational. So, going back to the lived experiences expertise, young people hold something very different from those traditional observations, because young people know how group chats function. They understand the social dynamics in comment sections. They know that there are unspoken rules that shape different digital spaces. And often they'll be able to recognize subtle harm that can spread through algorithms, through social pressure, or through just the silence as well. And this knowledge, while maybe it might be kind of high level held by research institutions or professors or people who are experts in digital safety, it cannot be replicated through this research alone. It has to come from people who are experiencing it. And this is why young people's participation cannot sit on the edge of these conversations. It really has to sit in the center. There's another concept in youth engagement that I want to kind of touch on briefly as well, and that is the idea of consultation versus co-design. So these are two words that we hear often when it comes to engaging with young people. Very common to come across both of these words in the same space as well, and both of these kind of concepts are both really valuable, but there's a massive difference in how each of these work. So many organizations will be able to say that they already engage young people, right? They might hold surveys or host panels or invite a young speaker to share their perspective at a conference. And these steps are absolutely not meaningless. They can be and are really valuable. However, they are not the same as co-design. So the kind of high-level engagement with young people we often call consultation. Consultation asks young people to respond to ideas that already exist. So when we come into a space and you've outlined the problems and you know kind of where you're going with the solutions, you're asking young people to respond to that and to give their feedback, often framed as feedback. You want them to tell you, do they think that, from a young person's perspective, is this a good idea? Or is there anything that you would change? Are often questions asked when it comes to consultation versus co-design. Co-design asks young people to shape those ideas from the very beginning. So they come into a space and there's no set agenda. There's no pre pre written idea of what you want to get out of something, because when young people enter a conversation that has structure already built, the influence is very, very limited, right? There's only so much that we can do to help you make a policy that is really youth friendly if you're only asking us after the fact, after you've created that policy, versus when you bring us into the conversation at the start and we help you to design that policy. So when engaging young people, we don't want to be reacting to a system. We don't want our young people to be reacting to ideas. We want them to be shaping it. This means involving young people at the stage where questions themselves are also being formed. So it can be really tricky in co-design, sometimes because you'll have restrictions around your funding or reporting, or even just the ways in which your team is working. But it's really important that you have young people involved at every step of the process. So when you're asking questions around, for example, I use the policy kind of idea that I was talking to earlier. When you're forming a policy around, say, keeping young people safe online, bringing young people into the conversation extremely early on. So helping them to form the questions around what problem are we trying to solve, what kind of digital safety matters to young people, what would support look like if it was designed by people experiencing the risk. Bringing them in so early on, sometimes it feels unproductive. And that's a point I also want to make, is that not all youth engagement will feel tidy all the time. In fact, if your youth engagement feels easy or if it feels simple to do, you're probably doing it wrong. Youth engagement will never be tidy because the idea of youth engagement itself challenges hierarchy within systems, and it challenges ego as well with leadership, because you have to strip conversations right back to the very, very bare bones, and young people have to be involved from the very start. But when we ask these questions collaboratively and when we engage young people from the start, the outcomes can dramatically shift. That's when solutions become more practical and the language that we use becomes more accurate and interventions become more trusted, because the systems are being created by the people they're meant to serve, right? And they're more likely to be used when they're being created by the people that they're serving as well. So another important truth to understand is that young people are not one single group. When conversations about young people happen at a national or international level, there can be a real tendency to compress millions of different experiences into one single category that is young people. But young people's experiences are very much shaped by identity and culture and location, language, gender, disability, family structure, economic reality. A rural teenager navigating online spaces is and probably will be having completely different concerns to a young person living in a city who is navigating online spaces. A young people who speaks multiple languages online may move through multiple digital communities throughout a single day. For Indigenous young people, digital spaces may hold opportunities to connect with culture and language, but it also might be a space that exposes them to really extreme racism and harassment. For young people who are in the rainbow community, the internet might be one of the first places that they encounter communities that reflect their identities. But again, they also may be facing discrimination and harassment online. So when safety frameworks ignore these differences, these different identities, they risk protecting a theoretical young person who does not actually exist. So if you see young people as one monolith, one large group of people who all have the same experiences, who all live the same lives, you actually risk not solving the problem for any of them at all. because meaningful youth engagement means making room for a really wide range of young voices, and not simply the ones who are easiest to access. So yeah, when engaging with young people, like I said before, youth engagement is never easy. It's always tricky to engage with young people, and it's never tidy. And so recognizing that when you're trying to bring young people into the conversation, if you are constantly reaching for the young people who are easiest to access, the ones who maybe live in city centres and so they have access to digital connection constantly, or young people who are who have a fairly easy home life and are able to reach out or reach into communities rather than constantly having communities reaching into them. If we are only accessing those young people who are easy to engage with, that completely alienates a whole group of young people who are not. And so this kind of brings me to my next point, which is that youth engagement really requires honesty around power. When a 16-year-old enters a room full of policymakers, executive leaders, researchers, senior leaders, the imbalance is really, really obvious. And I have been and will continue to be that only young person in the room very often. And so I know exactly how this feels, because adults control the funding, adults write the reports, adults decide which final recommendations move forward, and young people are often aware of this dynamic before anyone says a word, right? You can walk into a room, and if you're the only person wearing jeans and a hoodie, or if you're the only person, the youngest person in the room by 20 years, or if you're the only person who has a backpack, or if you're the only person who took the public bus, public transport to this meeting, or if you're the only person who had to take time off school to be there, you can notice this imbalance immediately. And it might be very subtle, it might be barely noticeable for everyone else in the room. But when you are the minority, or when you are kind of the underdog in a situation, you have to be on high alert. And sometimes young people will respond to being on alert or being the minority in a room by softening their ideas. Sometimes they'll say things that they think adults want to hear, or sometimes they won't say anything at all. And when we want to have authentic youth participation, we have to actively shift those dynamics. So creating environments where young people know their perspectives will not only be listened to, but they'll be taken seriously and acted upon. So this looks like making space for disagreement. It looks like accepting that young people will challenge existing approaches, and they'll ask really hard questions, and they will kind of confront you and challenge you on things. But it also means recognizing, again, that expertise does not only come from age or job titles, right? Going back to the very first point I made, is that lived experience is expertise. Trust in youth engagement only grows when young people see that their contributions lead to visible change. This is a concept in youth engagement called closing the loop. Without closing the loop, engagement can become really performative, and that's never ever, in any type of engagement, is never ever what you want to see or experience. So closing the loop looks like bringing the ideas that young people have shaped with you, and co-designing those ideas, and kind of figuring out what that looks like in practice, and working with those young people into now, okay, you've got these ideas and you want to put them into practice, putting them into practice, taking action on them, and then reporting back to young people. How did we use your insights? How did we take what you told us and put that into real world action? And sometimes it is not realistic to have taken these ideas and put them into action. Sometimes along the way, there might have been roadblocks. You might have run out of funding, or be experiencing some systemic barriers, or you can't get a meeting with the right person, whatever's going on. The biggest thing is that you have to communicate, right? So closing the loop is not only about kind of, I guess, finishing what you start, but if you get to a point in the circle of engagement, that means that you can't continue. You need to tell young people about it. You need to share and be transparent with them. One of my other points that is widely talked about in engagement practices is around compensation. Um, so yeah, I've been saying this whole time, lived experience is expertise. But when you're expected to share your experiences and your kind of, there can be often really traumatic stories or backgrounds to young people's experiences, especially in the digital safety conversation. We're often asked to share our insights and emotional labor in hard conversations around digital harm, recount situations, or explain how platforms have affected our mental health, or ask to provide solutions. This work is really, really, it's not uncommon for young people to be asked to do this voluntarily. And this is another one of those barriers that you see when you walk into a room, right? So when young people walk into the room, they're often the only one in that room who is not being paid. All of the organizations, if it's a meeting of multiple organizations, they're all being paid to be there because they're being paid. It's their job. And so knowing that young people are often not compensated for their time, and recognizing that is a really important first step, because it sends a really clear message that your time is valuable, right? Your knowledge matters, your experience matters, your contribution is not being taken for granted. We don't expect this of you. It's not an expectation. We are simply compensating you for your knowledge and your expertise. But this also solves one of the issues of widening access, right? Because when engagement relies on unpaid contributions, only a specific set of young people will be able to participate, and that is those who can afford to give their time freely. And it is a very, very small group of young people. So fair compensation makes participation a lot more equitable. Yeah, just a final kind of point that I want to briefly touch on is around tokenism. I won't talk about this for too long, because it is something that you can kind of, is often talked about. And one of the greatest risks in youth engagement is around tokenism, because you can often recognize it by the structure of a program, a day, a conference. Say a conference will run for 2 days, and panels will feature experts, policymakers, industry leaders, but then towards the end of the day, there will be a single youth panel, and it will have 3 young people on it, and they'll be invited to share their stories, and the audience will listen and feel inspired, and then the event closes. And the young voices have been present, but they have been separated from the decision making that shapes those outcomes. So if we use this conference kind of example, young people should have been part of the planning process and helped to shape the agenda and lead sessions and challenge ideas in real time during the day, because their role is not simply around telling stories, it's actually also about influencing the work. So young people should appear throughout the conference and lead sessions and shape different discussions. And a great example actually is this conference here, because the conference has been opened up to a young person to begin it, which is really awesome. So yeah, cool. Okay, I'm conscious that we are running over time a little bit, but I wanted to leave you with a few key questions to ask yourself throughout the day. And so there are 3 here.
Hi,
And you can
Lola.
take, yeah.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. We're actually over time to
Oh,
the next talk. I realized the chat, and one of the participants realized the chat wasn't turned on, which I'm sorry about.
oh,
And we've got some a really great feedback for you. So I'm really sorry to interrupt you. So we have to
There's no
jump
worries.
into
I
the
have
next
about
one.
1 minute left if you're all good
Okay.
with me finishing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it'll
absolutely.
be super quick. I have these three questions that I want to kind of leave you with today that you can take into the conference throughout your time over the next few days. The first is who is missing from the room. The second is if young people are experts in their digital lives, then what responsibility does that place on us or you? And the third is where might young people already be leading work that we have not taken the time to notice? So young people are already building things, they're already creating in their own communities. Where can we look for solutions in the community? Um, yeah, that brings me to the end of my conversation today. A better tomorrow is built by the young people who will inhabit it, is one of our key sayings at Gen Z Aotearoa. Um, and yeah, I just want to leave you with those kind of thoughts and for you to take that mindset into the conversations today. And I'm really excited to be joining a panel straight after this around the social media ban and young people. But thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed sharing today and really appreciate it.